So earlier today, I had cause to be on LinkedIn and I saw this post from Christine Talbot. Christine Talbot is a BHR and sustainability consultant. If you want to know so much more about her, you can check her out on LinkedIn. I follow her basically because of much of the nuggets that she puts out there within the BHR space. And I can tell you that one of the things that caught my fancy earlier today had to do with a training being organized by her in collaboration with other persons that has to do with making due diligence work for SMEs, making due diligence work for SMEs. And I had to understand also that within the whole SME structure, there are certain industries that are seen as less mature industries. What that may basically mean may have to do with the fact that less mature industries, even though they are SMEs, but the requirement for them to comply with BHR principles may necessarily not be too heavy on them. And I say that because there are a lot of SMEs in the global south. You look at Africa, for example, you're looking at the global south, you're looking at a whole lot of issues, a whole lot of things, a whole lot of challenges that businesses face within the global south. And as a result of that, people don't even understand what business and human rights is, for example. Like I've had course, I have worked with almost about 2,000 companies here in Nigeria. And I put out a survey that basically that's a few companies now, just asking the questions around BHR. And people are like, what's BHR? They don't necessarily know what business and human rights is. And as a human rights practitioner for about 12 years, I have that knowledge, and I had to talk to some of these CEOs on what BHR really means for their businesses, especially for those of them who are within the agro sector, agriculture space. A whole lot of them I've had to work with over the years. And we ask these questions. Why? Because we want to really see what are the efforts at mainstreaming BHR into the activities of companies is like wishful thinking within the global south, or is just something that people necessarily don't give attention to. That may also be because they necessarily don't care. People might see BHR as another layer of compliance that their business necessarily doesn't require. They may necessarily not be looking at it from the angle of the risk factors involved when you do not pay premium attention to what BHR can do for your company, and also what the absence of the knowledge of BHR can do for a company in terms of the risk. So one of the things that I wrote down here on that wonderful post, of course, on LinkedIn, had to do with the fact that I said most businesses fall under the SME category, and the less mature industries must not be left behind. Looking at the needs assessment for the Global South, easy to understand rules on human rights remain vaguely construed. What I mean basically by that is when people talk about BHR, for example, if you're talking to maybe an oil and gas company that may not be doing heavy numbers, but maybe people that just take contracts in oil and gas, or maybe in real estate, for example, many persons may not be able to tell you what business and human rights is really about. If you talk about human rights, they have a brief idea. If you talk about business, they are very comfortable. But when you're trying to, bridge that nexus between business and human rights, a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of CEOs, a lot of C-suite executives do not have an idea of what business and human rights is. So what I do by these videos that I put out there much of the time is to bridge that gap, to make companies understand that mainstreaming business and human rights into their operations is actually for the good of these companies. It's for the good of the companies. It gives you that edge, especially if you are doing business across borders. You can easily say that you are complying with, even if they need to comply. In most of the global southern countries, even in Nigeria, the need to comply might not be expressly documented or expressly provided for in a document like we have it across Europe. We may not have that holistic structure, but the need to comply simply means that as a company, you are taking responsibility for your growth. You are taking responsibility for your image. You are also taking responsibility for the lapses that could likely occur in the future if there is an absence of BHR principles within your operations. So that's very important and very key for companies to begin to think in this particular direction. So when I talk about rules on human rights being remaining vaguely construed, what that just simply means is if you take a survey of 1,000 companies, let's say companies that even do well, let's even look at medium scale companies, not the small now, the medium scale. If you take a survey of 1,000 companies, they may not be able to tell you in a very clear sense where the nexus between business and human rights lie. When people think about human rights, they might be thinking of right to life, right to freedom of speech, those kinds of things. But when you now want to break it down, when you want to bring it in line with the sectoral relevance of what business and human rights is really about, a lot of companies are found wanting. If you look at ESG, for example, you look at the ESG principles, some companies have that idea of what ESGs really are. But when you're talking about BHR, clearly, most companies would not be able to tell you what BHR really stands for or what it's about. So I went for that to say that at the SME level, very little on BHR can be inferred, while knowledge is somewhat absent. If you are trying to infer the principles of business and human rights, for example, don't forget about the story of the survey that I talked about. You would realize that you can when you break it down, remove the word business and human rights, break it down to what the principles within the UNGP talks about, you will see that certain companies are mildly complying to the extent to which they have the knowledge around what BHR covers. Even while the knowledge is absent, some companies are mildly complying. For example, you will look at the sectors like the oil and gas sector, for example, where you have NATI, you have the Content Development Agency, for example, local content. You would see that some of the principles that the regulator uses to engage with these companies could also stem from the spirit within business and human rights. So that's a beautiful thing. Like I said, the words clearly might not be used, but when you look at the inferences, you would find that the concepts and the spirit behind the language of BHR exists within the operations of certain companies that are highly regulated. Then we move further. I believe strongly that within the Global South, the journey, would I say the journey has started? Or would I say we are just packing our bags? I think I'll put it that way. The journey hasn't necessarily started. We are just packing our bags before we begin to embark on that journey. I join companies, I join CEOs, I join board members of corporates to begin to rethink the future of companies, begin to rethink the future of engagement between companies, communities, stakeholders, and begin to infuse the spirit that exists between business and human rights into your operations. You would realize 10 years down the line, we would not be having this same conversation. We would now have a better society, a better framework within which companies operate, stakeholders, communities, everyone adapting to the newness within the concept to make business better for everyone. And of course, the end user are persons across the globe. People who use those products that companies produce would now realize that they necessarily don't have to begin to scream aloud about issues that the BHR consciousness has already resolved. So it's a long road. We haven't started that journey yet, in my opinion. We are just packing our bags. And of course, when we get our bags on, we get our boots strapped, and everyone gets ready for this journey. It's such a beautiful one. Global South, so much more needs to be done. And I would say finally that it's good to see how SMEs are being captured early in line with human rights due diligence. I feel that this is a new scope, is a new area that professionals within the space in Nigeria, across West Africa, across Africa, can begin to look towards to bring about the newness or the freshness of the innovations that BHR is poised to deliver to companies who believe and who are willing to join this train. This is a train of transformation. I very much believe that. And I'm also very sure that when we begin to make conversations around BHR commonplace within the Nigerian or the African parlance, or of course within the global South parlance, so much more can be achieved. We can do much more by providing home-based solutions that can drive businesses even to greater profitability. Even to greater profitability. Those solutions are within the mindset and the frameworks that are already existing in other parts of the world. We just need to tap into it and create a system that ensures that when you look at human rights, even within, you walk into a mall, you see products, you can say, oh, this product, I'm sure that these companies have done the right thing to bring this product from the farms to the shelves. I hope to see you on the next video. Thank you so very much once more, Christian Talbot. Yeah, thank you.